Hey everybody, it's Rob back with another video. This time we're going to be talking about port forwarding with a tool called Chisel. I've already kind of gone over pivoting a bit with a tool called Lagolo in my first video, and then subsequently my last video covered pivoting and port forwarding with Metasploit. Um, Chisel's a pretty cool tool that I discovered when I was doing um, a practice AD set um, for the OSCP. And it came up when there was a MySQL database that no matter what I tried, I could not connect to it. It just basically would say the host is not authorized to connect to this database. And it turns out, a SQL database can be bound to the loopback adapter, which kind of prohibits anyone from logging in remotely. Not only that, even if it's not bound to the loopback adapter, accounts could be set up to where those specific accounts can only log in locally to the database. So a couple of use cases where Chisel could come in handy is specifically if the database itself is bound to the loopback adapter and you can't access it remotely, or even if it's not, and you can access it remotely, the credentials that you've come across or you compromised are not enabled to be used remotely, meaning that they can only be used to log into the database locally. So that's where port forwarding comes in, and Chisel's a pretty good tool to do this. So we're going to skip the whole compromise part of the video. I'm going to show you in detail those two use cases and how you would set Chisel up and enable you to connect to the database, whether it was locally bound to the loopback adapter or the account was just restricted to logging into the database locally. Um, and I'm also going to show you that Chisel will work if you install the agent on the compromised machine um, with reduced access, meaning maybe you're not an administrator on that machine or you don't have NT authority system. For the first part of the demonstration, I will be logged in as an administrator on the Windows machine because I need that to be able to set up MySQL. And I'm going to show you how that's done. So right now, if we look at this Windows machine, I have MySQL on here, okay? And if I do a quick netstat -A-P for TCP, you can see right here, there's a MySQL database bound to 0.0.0.0, which means it's listening on all interfaces, okay? So if we go to the Kali attack machine and we bring up all of our terminals, what we can do is we can try connecting to the database via the IP address with two accounts. This first one has the ability to log into the database remotely, okay? So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm logging in as RobF to the SQL database on port 3306, skipping SSL, and I'm asking it to prompt me for a password. So I'm going to enter my password, and it may take a second here. But it should work. And there we go. We're connected to the MySQL database. So I can do show databases, semicolon. There's all my databases, right? So we're going to quit. Now, I do have an account that is set to only be able to log in to that database locally. Poor old Jerry. He can't connect to this database remotely. This may take a second to go through. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to enter the password. And it didn't take very long. It says access denied for Jerry. Okay, so you can see that RobF can log into the database remotely. Jerry cannot. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Windows machine, and I'm going to edit the my.cnf, which is the configuration file for MySQL server. And I'm going to look for the server section, which is right here. And you see I have bind address set to 127.0.0.1 commented out. So I'm going to uncomment that. I'm going to save that. We're going to restart the SQL server. We're going to come back over here. We're going to do a netstat again. And you're going to see this time the database is no longer listening on all interfaces. It's now bound to the loopback device, which is 127.0.0.1. So theoretically, no one can log into this database remotely. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our Kali box, and I'm going to try and log in using RobF, which is the one we know we were able to log in remotely with. And I'm going to enter my password. And it may take a second, but I assure you it's not going to work. Okay. So while we're waiting for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to show you there are two parts to Chisel. There is a client and a server. So if we go into CD tools and then I do an ls, I have a folder in here for Chisel. And I do another ls. I've downloaded from the GitHub site, which I am going to include a link in the description below to this GitHub site. If you want to get to all the files, this is the Chisel GitHub. You just click the releases down here, and it'll take you, there's literally like a version for everything here. There's versions for ARM, Windows, everything. Okay, so there will be a link in the description below to this. I have downloaded the 32-bit version for Linux, Windows, and then this is the Linux version, the 64-bit Linux version that I have here. And I also have the 64-bit binary for Windows. Now, in the meantime, while we're still waiting for this to fail, and it will fail, for some reason it just takes a bit of time, we're going to come in here and I'm going to show you that still listening on the loopback adapter, and I have Chisel on this machine already. I'm going to log in with a non-privileged account as soon as this other login attempt fails. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to start the Chisel 8 server and the Chisel client. To start the Chisel server on the Linux client, you have to be root. So you're going to start with Chisel. You're going to use the option server with the port of 8001. I mean, you could use another port, but that's the port that the GitHub repository instructions use, and I've used it and it works just fine. And you're going to set the option reverse, and then that's going to turn the server on. So, okay, we did finally fail over here, by the way. You can see that RobF can't connect. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start this Chisel server here on the Linux box. And I'm going to enter my password. And that Chisel server has started. So now we're going to come back here to the Windows box. And I'm actually going to log out as a privileged account. And what we're going to do is just kind of pretend that we've compromised this box. And theoretically, we would not have a GUI interface. We would have, just a shell, right? Because if we had a GUI interface, we could probably get into the database another way, okay? But if you just had a shell and you couldn't access the database because it was a non-privileged account, this would be very helpful. Gotta log in as a non-privileged account. It may take a second. One thing you always have to remember when you have these labs with all these virtual machines is they all use resources, so things tend to be a little slow sometimes. But essentially, it works great, okay? So we're going to open up a command prompt. And we're going to go into, I think I have it in the downloads folder. And we're going to do a dir. And yes, I have Chisel in there. So now to start the Chisel client, all we do is type chisel.exe. And we want the client, so we use that argument. Then we point to the attack box, which is 30.1.36. And the port that we set, which is 8001. Then the remote port that we want to use to connect to the database on the attack machine, which is going to be 3306. What we're going to be referencing is localhost, right? And then the local port that we want to basically forward is, and I forgot a colon here, sorry, is 3306. So if we break this command down real quick, we have Chisel, which is the binary, client, which is the option we want to use. We have the server running on the attack box. Then we have the IP of the attack box referencing the port that the Chisel server is running on. Then what we have is the port that we want to forward traffic to and where we want to forward the traffic from, localhost 3306. So to make it easy, I'm just forwarding MySQL traffic to the port that's usually used for MySQL because I don't have a database on my computer and it's not a problem. If you did have MySQL on your computer, you'd just pick a different port, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter, and that Chisel client is now running, and it's forwarding the traffic, the MySQL traffic to my attack box, okay? So if you remember, you wouldn't be able to, if this was a 127.0.0.1 bound database, like I showed you, RobF was not able to log into it, right? Also, any account that is local, restricted to local logins, couldn't log in as well, okay? So first we'll try RobF again, now that this traffic is being passed. And what we have to change here is obviously, we don't want to point at the server anymore. We want to point at localhost because that's where this traffic is being forwarded. Now MySQL is going to try to log into the local host on port 3306, which is my attack machine, because that traffic is being forwarded via the Chisel client to the Chisel server on my box. So when I hit enter here, I'm going to enter my password, and we're connected to the database, okay? So if you come across or you happen to know, because you may not see it, if you do an mmap scan, I don't really necessarily think that you're going to see 3306, right? If it's bound to the loopback adapter, you're probably not. But if you knew there was a database on there and it was locally bound, you could use Chisel to forward that traffic. Certainly, if you see a database and the credentials that you have are locally bound, this will 100% work for you, okay? So what we're going to do, just to demonstrate that, is if you remember, if we look back up, a little bit, Jerry could not get in, right? He could not get in even when it was not a locally bound database, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to exit, and we're going to try and log in as Jerry this time, which is a locally restricted account. It can only log into this database via the local host. So we hit enter, we enter the password, and bam, we're in, okay? So this tool saved my bacon on the boxes that I was trying to compromise for the OSCP challenge labs, okay? There was this, I'll say it again, there was a MySQL database that I just could not log into. It kept saying this IP address is not authorized to log into this database. Even if I was on machines that have been compromised that are on the exact same subnet could not do it until I used Chisel to forward the traffic, and then I was able to do it. So again, this tool can forward any kind of port traffic. I just chose MySQL because I think it was a good use case. In the case that you know there's a database on the machine and maybe it's not visible because it's locally bound to the loopback adapter, okay, which means it's supposed to prohibit being able to log in remotely to it. Okay, so we know that we can get around that. That's the first use case. The second use case is maybe you compromise an account, you get MySQL credentials, you try and log in remotely, and those credentials don't work because they're locally restricted, meaning that that set of credentials can only log in locally to the database via the local host. In that use case, Chisel will work fantastic for you. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. I mean, what I can do real quick is I can come over here just to show you. We'll do a quit to get out of here. I'll kill this Chisel server. I'll go back. I will kill the Chisel client. You may have to hit Control C a couple of times. Then I'll come back here and I'll try and log in again via Jerry. Enter the password and it fails. Oh, you know what? Because we killed that, just to be 100% sure, obviously you're not going to be able to do localhost anymore. We want to put the actual IP address back in. And again, this may take a second, but it's not going to work. And I'm not going to make you watch and wait, but you saw how quickly it connected last time, and you saw that it took a bit of time to fail the last time. So hopefully this video is helpful. Chisel's a great tool. I highly recommend you guys check it out. Like I said, it's pretty popular and worked well in the use cases that I needed it for when I was doing some practice in the proving grounds. So see you again next video. I think I'm going to do a little bit of a change of pace next time, and we're going to talk about abusing sudo privileges in Linux and how to escalate, do privesc in Linux via abuse of sudo. Okay? See you guys. Bye.